Welcome to video 1 in the Gyprock DIY Video Series, where we'll show you the basics for installing Gyprock Plasterboard to standard residential ceilings and walls. We'll be demonstrating adhesive screw fixing to clean timber frames. For any installation aspects not covered, we recommend you download a copy of the Red Book 2 Residential Installation Guide from the Gyprock website. Before you start, make sure you've thought about personal safety for your installation. And here are the tools and materials you'll see used in our project. Let's get started by measuring up. For your plasterboard sheet requirements, measure the width and height of each wall. Measure the width and height of any openings, such as doors and windows. For ceilings, measure the width and length of the room. These measurements will also be used for ordering your cornice. The key thing to aim for is to have the least number of joints possible. Gyprock manufactures a range of plasterboard options for different project types, so make sure you order the right one for your job. We're using 10mm Gyprock Plus. On walls, we'll be installing our sheets horizontally, so we'll only have one recessed edge joint on each wall. For wall heights close to 2.4 meters, you'll use two 1200mm wide sheets. Over 2.4 meters, you'll need to switch to 1350s. If you plan to have narrow skirtings, you'll need to cut off the 60mm sheet edge recess along the floor and take that into account for your material choice. Where possible, avoid butt joints at sheet ends by choosing a sheet length that covers the full wall width. Where a butt joint is unavoidable, but not permitted on a framing member in your particular project, back blocking will be required. Refer to the Red Book 2 for details. For our ceilings, we'll use Gyprock Super Seal, which is installed at right angles to the framing. Again, choose the sheet width that will give you the least joints in the job. For your ceiling sheet length, use the same thinking as for walls. Add around 10% extra to your plasterboard requirements for wastage. In addition to plasterboard, you'll need Gyprock acrylic stud adhesive and screws. Make sure you store Gyprock plasterboard lying down in a covered, dry place away from rain or excess humidity. Sheets are easier to handle on their edge, and it's best to have two people for lifting and installing. For your final measure, deduct 10 to 20mm from your length dimension to allow for maneuvering and frame movement. Gyprock plasterboard can be cut with a fine-tooth saw, but the easiest way to cut Gyprock, like the professionals, is by scoring and snapping. Measure and mark both edges of the sheet on the face side. Score a line all the way across using a sharp utility knife and a straight edge, making sure you cut through the paper facing and only a couple of millimeters into the core. Push on the offcut piece to snap the core along the score line. Now simply cut through the back lining paper at the fold. For cutting around door and window openings, first measure and mark the sheet and then make your first cut using a saw. Once you have the saw cut, you can then saw or score and snap the other cut. A plasterboard saw is ideal for cutting out holes for power points, switches and light fittings. Push the tip of the saw through the sheet to start the cut, then cut along your marked lines. First up, check your framing, and where there is no ceiling framing at the ends to fix to, install trimmers or metal angle. Mark where your sheet edges and center lines will be on the frame. As the perimeter and center line of the sheets are fixed with screws only, start applying Gyprock acrylic stud adhesive on the first joist in from an end. Apply a 25mm daub of adhesive around 15mm high with a small joint knife around 230mm away from the center line and sheet edges. Daubs should be no further than 230mm apart. Repeat this on the rest of the joists, leaving the end joist free of adhesive. In all cases, make sure that adhesive will be no closer than 200mm to any screw fixing. Making sure you have a solid working platform, carefully lift the sheet into position 5 to 10mm out from the wall edges. A mechanical plasterboard lifter can make this part of the process easier. Fix the sheet to the joists 10 to 25mm in from the edge along the recess, starting from the middle and working outwards. Take care to drive the fastener just below the board surface without breaking the face paper. Here, we're using a plasterboard screwdriver bit, which is a great help. Next, press the sheet firmly against the adhesive and fix along the opposite edge in the same way. Then, fix screws around 30mm each side of the center line on each joist. At the wall ends of the sheet, fix with screws 10 to 16mm from the sheet end, at maximum 300mm spacings where there will be a cornice finish, or 150mm for a set finish. Install subsequent sheets with no gaps between the edges. For the last sheet, check the measurement, deduct 5 to 10mm, and cut it to fit, ensuring the cut edge is at the wall side of the room. Any butt joints at sheet ends should be fixed to joists at maximum 200mm centers without adhesive. Offset any butt joints in adjacent sheets by 600mm. Off-frame butt joints will require back blocking. Refer to the Red Book 2 for details. Check your wall studs are straight and aligned without gaps or bulges, and plane back or pack out as necessary. As the perimeter of the sheet only, and not the center line, will be fixed with screws, start at the first stud in from the end and apply a 25mm daub of adhesive 230mm in from the long edges. Then, for 1200mm wide sheets, apply 2 more daubs evenly spaced between these down the stud, or 3 more daubs on 1350mm sheets. Repeat this on each stud, leaving the sheet end studs free of adhesive. Place plasterboard offcuts along the wall and lift your first sheet horizontally into place with 5 to 10mm clearance at the ends. Fix it to each of the studs around 10 to 25mm in from the edge along the recess, starting in the center and working outwards. Take care to drive the fastener just below the board surface without breaking the face paper. Press the sheet firmly against the adhesive and fix along the opposite edge in the same way. Fix at the wall ends and around any openings with screws 10 to 16mm from the edge every 300mm. Any butt joints at sheet ends should be fixed to the studs at 200mm centers without adhesive. Stagger any butt joints in adjacent sheets by at least 1 stud width. Drive temporary nails or screws through a small plasterboard offcut into every second stud in the middle of the sheet to help hold it tight against the studs while the adhesive dries. Make sure you don't fix through any of the adhesive. Once the bottom sheets are in, you can check the height above each and trim as necessary, making sure you keep one recessed edge intact. Fit the top sheets in the same way, making sure the recessed edges butt together with no gaps. For narrow walls with no center studs and the ends of walls, adhesive is not used and the vertical edges of the sheets are fixed in the same way as for wider walls. For these, you could also use a vertical sheet of plasterboard with the recesses removed. If you've planned a ceiling without cornice, make sure there is no gap at the wall-ceiling junction. The board recesses could be removed, but square setting can be used to fill recessed edges and achieve a stronger joint. Now that your ceiling and walls are lined, the next step is to set the joints. Take a look at video 2 in the series, Setting Gyprock Joints. For any questions about your specific project, check with your Gyprock supplier for advice.